Welcome to Let's Talk About the Book. This is a series where I'll be talking about the books I've written and those written by others, not just as an author trying to explain what's inside the books on the pages, but as a man reflecting on why these ideas matter, where they came from, and how they may speak to the life of the reader. Today I want to talk about Manhood 101. Now, when people hear a title like Manhood 101, they may assume the book is simply about telling men what to do, how to act, or how to fit into some narrow definition of masculinity. But that is not really what this book is. At its heart, Manhood 101 is a foundation book. It is the beginning of a larger conversation about what it means to become a man with direction, values, discipline, and self-awareness. This is not a book written from a place of judgment. It is not written to shame men. It is not written to tell men they are failing. It is written as an invitation to pause, reflect, and ask one of the most important questions a man can ask himself: what kind of man am I becoming? That question is where the value of this book really begins. Why this book matters. One of the reasons I wrote Manhood 101 is because I believe a lot of men are carrying questions they do not always say out loud. Questions like, am I doing enough? Am I leading my life well? Do I have a clear set of values? Am I reacting to life, or am I actually directing it? What does it mean to be strong without becoming hard? What does it mean to be kind without becoming weak? What does it mean to be a man in a world that often gives mixed messages about masculinity? Those are not small questions, and the truth is, most men are not handed a clear manual for this journey. A boy grows older, but age alone does not teach him wisdom. Life teaches some lessons, but not always in a way we understand right away. Sometimes we learn through pain, sometimes through failure, sometimes through responsibility, sometimes through loss. And that is part of what Manhood 101 explores. It looks at manhood not as something you simply claim, but as something you grow into. That is why I think this book can be valuable for men at different stages of life. A young man may read it and see a roadmap. An older man may read it and see reminders of lessons life has already tried to teach him. A father may read it and think about what he wants to pass on. A man rebuilding himself may read it and find language for the kind of man he still wants to become. That is the real purpose of the book, not to lecture, but to create reflection. The educational side of the book. From an educational standpoint, Manhood 101 works almost like a starting course in masculine development. That is why I use the phrase 101. In college, a 101 course is usually the foundation. It gives you the basics, it gives you the language, it introduces the key ideas that everything else will build from. That is how I see this book. It introduces the reader to the basic building blocks of manhood, responsibility, discipline, courage, respect, integrity, emotional control, service, wisdom, and legacy. But these are not just nice words. Each one of those values becomes practical when life puts pressure on you. Responsibility matters when nobody else is coming to fix the problem. Discipline matters when you do not feel like doing what needs to be done. Courage matters when truth costs you something. Integrity matters when no one is watching. Respect matters when you are dealing with people who test your patience. Emotional control matters when anger, fear, or disappointment wants to take the wheel. And legacy matters because every man is leaving something behind, whether he realizes it or not. That is what gives this book its educational appeal. It takes ideas that people often talk about in vague ways and brings them into the daily life of a man. It asks the reader to look at manhood not as a performance, but as a practice. And that is an important distinction, because performance is about how you appear. Practice is about who you are becoming. The personal side of the book. When I think about Manhood 101, I do not just think about concepts. I think about lived experience. I think about the different seasons men go through. There is the season of trying to prove yourself. There is the season of building your life. There is the season of carrying responsibility. There is the season of loss. There is the season of rebuilding. There is the season where you begin asking deeper questions about meaning, purpose, family, faith, duty, and legacy. And through all of those seasons, a man is being shaped. That is why this book is not written like a textbook. It is written more like a conversation. It is the kind of book a man can sit with. He can read a chapter and think about his own life. He can see where he is strong. He can see where he needs work. He can see the areas where maybe he has been reacting instead of reflecting. And sometimes that is all a man needs to begin changing direction. Not someone yelling at him, not someone shaming him, not someone telling him he is broken, but a clear mirror. A book like Manhood 101 can become that mirror. What makes Manhood 101 different? There are a lot of conversations today about masculinity. Some are helpful, some are angry, some are defensive, some are confused. Some reduce masculinity down to money, women, status, or control. But Manhood 101 takes a different approach. It does not try to make masculinity loud. It tries to make it grounded. It does not tell a man he has to dominate the world. It asks whether he can govern himself, and I think that is where real manhood starts. Can you govern your emotions? Can you govern your habits? Can you govern your words? Can you govern your reactions? Can you govern your desires? Can you govern your time? Because before a man can lead a home, a family, a business, a mission, or a community, he has to learn how to lead himself. That is not always exciting. It is not always glamorous. But it is necessary, and that is one of the reasons I believe this book belongs in the hands of men who are serious about self-development. Not because it has every answer, no single book does, but because it begins the right conversation. And sometimes the right conversation is what opens the door to transformation. Who this book is for, I would say Manhood 101 is for any man who has ever felt that there must be more to manhood than just surviving, providing, reacting, or pushing through life. It is for the man who wants to understand himself better. It is for the young man who needs a foundation. It is for the father who wants to pass on something meaningful. It is for the man who has been through hardship and is trying to rebuild with wisdom. It is for the man who wants to be strong but not bitter. It is for the man who wants to be respected but also wants to be worthy of that respect. It is for the man who understands that masculinity is not just about power. It is about responsibility. That is why the book has value beyond just reading it once. It is the kind of book you can come back to. You may read it at one stage of life and connect with one part of it. Then later, after life has tested you, you may come back and see something deeper. That is what a good foundational book should do. It should grow with the reader. The quiet message of the book, the quiet message of Manhood 101 is that a man does not have to stay where he is. He can grow, he can reflect, he can correct course, he can become more disciplined, he can become more honorable, he can become more emotionally steady, he can become more useful to the people who depend on him, he can become more aligned with his values. And I think that message matters today. Because many men are walking around with pressure on them, but not always with direction in them. They are carrying stress, expectations, memories, disappointments, responsibilities, and silent battles. But they may not have a framework for understanding what all of that is shaping them into. Manhood 101 gives language to that process. It helps a man begin to see his life as part of a larger masculine journey. Not just random struggle, not just survival, but formation. And once a man begins to see his life that way, the question changes. It is no longer just, why is this happening to me? It becomes, what is this building in me? That shift alone can change how a man carries himself. Why this book belongs in the series. This is why I wanted to begin this conversation with Manhood 101, because many of my books build from this foundation. When I talk about frame, discipline, purpose, stoicism, honor, relationships, leadership, emotional control, and legacy, all of those ideas connect back to this first foundation. Manhood 101 is one of those books that helps set the table. It gives the reader the starting language. It opens the door. It begins the reflection. And for anyone who wants to understand the larger body of my work, this book is a good place to start. Not because it is complicated, but because it is foundational. Sometimes the most important books are not the ones that overwhelm you with information. Sometimes they are the ones that help you name what you already knew was missing. That is what I believe Manhood 101 can do. It can help a man name the standard he wants to live by. So as we close this episode of Let's Talk About the Book, I want to leave you with this thought. Manhood 101 is not just a book about masculinity. It is a book about becoming more aware, becoming more disciplined, becoming more responsible, becoming more grounded, becoming more honorable, becoming more intentional. And every man, no matter his age, is still becoming something. The only question is whether he is becoming that by accident or by intention. That is why I believe this book matters. It gives men a place to begin, or for some men, a place to return to. So, when you pick up Manhood 101, do not read it as someone being told what to do. Read it as a conversation. Read it as a mirror. Read it as a starting point. Read it as a quiet challenge to look at your life and ask, am I becoming the man I was meant to be? This has been Let's Talk About the Book. Today we reflected on Manhood 101, a foundational book in the masculine journey and a powerful entry point into the larger conversation about values, responsibility, discipline, and legacy. Until next time, keep reading, keep reflecting, and keep becoming